what we're seeing more now is that 3CX are now pushing us more towards their cloud-based app as opposed to the desktop apps. It doesn't mean you can't use the desktop app. I personally prefer the desktop app, but those of you that use multiple computers, etc., may find that logging into the cloud-based app is much easier and more convenient. What we're also seeing is that they are releasing more features in the cloud-based app, whereas the desktop app is no longer being developed. So really, 3CX would encourage us all to start using the cloud-based app. One thing you will also see is a QR code, and that is actually your QR code, which you can use with the mobile app to scan your account into the system also. So if you're going to be using the mobile app, which is mentioned further on down in the email, once you've installed the app from the App Store or from the Android store, you can then use the app to then scan this QR code, which is your unique QR code. This will also program the app on your mobile with all of your phone account settings. So for now, I'm going to focus on just keeping things very, very simple and very straightforward. I can see here my extension number. I can see my extension's PIN number, and this is the number that I would use to go into my voicemail. And here you'll see how you can actually get into your voicemail. So for those that are using individual extensions, this will be very, very important, especially if you're not in a queuing system. Many clients at the moment are using call groups and queuing systems, so very rarely will you actually get a voicemail in your mailbox that you need to listen, because there's generally going to be a group email address that will receive all of the messages. But if you ever did need to go into your voicemail, these are the bits and pieces that you would need in order to get into your voicemail using your handset. Now we get to the web login. Now ignore this gobbledygook. I've got high levels of security on my email, so it's filtering out all of my lists and rules. The important bit here, if I can select it and just show you, is the bit that comes after HTTPS. This bit here, from the H to the end, that is basically the URL that you're actually interested in. So yours will look something like this. It will have your company domain that we've assigned to the phone system, along with the web client bit at the end, and that is what you would generally copy and paste into your favorite web browser. Once that comes up, you'll then use your extension number and your password to then get into your phone system account. I'm just going to keep going through the email just to show you one last thing. Everyone that has an extension has the ability to make video calls through the phone system. So if you want to make use of that free service, again, this is the URL that you're interested in. So you can copy and paste, you can email this to people, they can copy and paste it straight into their browser, and as long as you're in your receiving phone system in the video call waiting for them, you can allow them in, and then you can have a video chat. So this free video conferencing is accessible via this URL here, and you can send that to anybody internally or externally out of your business and make video calls. So that's the welcome email in a very, very quick snapshot, just to show you that it is very straightforward and it's very simple. For now, I'm going to put that away and assume that I've used my information here to log into my web client, and this is what I now see. A lot of the web client functions, as I say, are similar to the desktop functions. They're just put in different places. So I can see the people that are online at the moment within our phone system. I can also go to chat, and I can create a new chat session by clicking on the plus, and I can chat with anybody inside the building in a similar way that I would use Teams. It's entirely up to you whether you use that or not, and it's heavily dependent on the processes that you use within your company. But that, again, chat is a free service, part of the system. I did talk very briefly about the video conferencing side of things, and here you'll see, here I am. This is what happens when you click on the meet icon, and this would be an impulsive, quick meeting where you've given the recipient the URL to copy and paste into their browser, and we're going straight into the call, as opposed to setting a scheduled call, which will then invite people via their email and place them into a diary and coordinate between the two of you. That's a separate way of doing a video call, not to be confused with this ad hoc way. They're very, very different and not to be confused with one another. Moving forward to calls, here is where you can see all of the calls made coming in or out of the business. And this is a good way if you're trying to find a phone number or see when someone called you. This keeps a full history of the calls that have been made and allows you to call the people back or add that person to your company phone book. You can do all of that from this screen right here. So if I move forward through to my panel, some of you may not have this, but it just really depends on the privileges that you've been assigned within the business. But again, this just gives you an overview of the activity of calls coming in and out of the business. And then the top right hand side, I can toggle this through. If you've got any specific call handling queues set up, you can then see who's working on those queues at the moment, who's receiving calls, how many calls each of those people have received and dealt with, or conversely, any abandoned calls, any calls that were made coming into the business that weren't picked up. And you can then obviously trace that back through the call list and see which calls did get abandoned. So you can then obviously action that and get onto that. A more simplified view is the wallboard, which again I'm accessing from the top right hand corner. So you can see abandoned calls, answered, total number of calls, average talk time, waiting time, etc., etc. This board will refresh. Generally it refreshes each day, but we can tweak that to be a longer aged wallboard if you so wish. Sometimes helpful for sales departments to have that. Contacts. Contacts, again, extremely useful. A company address book is something that is obviously really useful within a business, and you can dial anyone you want from within the company address book, or you can add new people. Again, this depends on the permissions and privileges that you've been assigned at the beginning of setting the system up. If you weren't asked, then you potentially have got the ability to add contacts to the phone book. But if you do want to have that functionality and you don't seem to have that, then obviously speak to your manager and they will put out a support request to us for us to open up privileges that you can add people to your company phone book. One thing I would say is when you're adding people to the company phone book, ensure that you've got add to company phone book clicked. If you don't, that will be adding that contact and all the information to only your address book. Each and every person has the ability to have their own personal address book, but other people can't access that. So if you want to get your company phone book kept up to date with new contacts, suppliers, clients, etc., etc., you must ensure that that is ticked by default while you're inputting the information. Once you've inputted the contact's information, be it supplier, etc., etc., whatever they are, make sure top right hand corner you're clicking on the save button, otherwise that information will be lost. We also have another area in here by clicking on the three dots, and it's settings, and you can add a picture of yourself if you want to. I've chosen to do that. You don't have to do that if you don't want to. I've chosen to add my mobile number, and once again you can see those important URLs that I was pointing to earlier. So you've got a similar URL for talking. So if someone wants to have a computer-to-computer conversation with you, they can copy and paste that into a URL. Some people have chosen to have these URLs on their website as opposed to putting their telephone numbers on the website. And again, if you want to have scheduled meetings or ad hoc meetings, this is the URL that you can copy and paste and email to your contacts. Chat, we've talked about chat. We can have notifications play if someone wants to chat with you. I've turned mine off temporarily because we tend to use Teams a lot of the time, but there are occasions where I might be out of the office or working from home, and I may turn this notification back on because I might be using the mobile app on my mobile. Audio and video, I would leave those settings alone, leave them as default, unless of course you have got bespoke camera or video or microphones that you do want to choose specifically, but generally you should not need to really change that. The one area I really do want to point out to you, which is a really powerful, easy win from the get-go, is I would encourage you to start getting your head around the different statuses that the phone system will allow you to have. Now, these are very useful, especially when you're working in teams or groups within the business. You may want, depending on the status that you place the app, you may want your phone extension to behave in a certain way. For instance, on a business trip, you may want your calls to go to one of your team members or even a group. And we can forward it either to a voicemail, or we can forward it to an extension, we can forward to a mobile, we can forward it to an external number, or we can forward it to a system extension. System extensions tend to be things like daytime or nighttime voicemails, etc., etc., or we can just send a busy signal. So you can actually dictate, depending on the status you place the app in, how the phone system, your extension, behaves. You can choose individuals, you can choose groups, as I've said. So for instance, extension number, I could choose a specific person to get my calls while I'm away on a business trip. Within this area, you can also specify what your phone extension does depending on the type of call. Type of call being internal calls or external calls. I could also choose for all of my external calls to be forwarded to my mobile. If your company is using call queues and you've got teams working together as departments, for instance, a sales team or a technical team, you may want your external call, to come to you and then get distributed back out to the team. So in that instance, I would use something like a system extension, and I would then go and look for the call queue for my particular department. So I'm going to choose our main call handling queue, and basically any external calls come into my extension while my phone is in business trip mode will get pushed back to the main call handling. I know that that will then go to the rest of the team, and anyone picking up that call will then be able to take a message or act on the request, whatever that call might be. Greetings is an area that you can use to customize the greetings for your extension. If you've got a microphone connected to your computer or you're using a laptop, you can create and record a greeting depending on the different statuses. So for instance, if you're away, if you're on Do Not Disturb, if you're on lunch, if you're on a business trip, you can record a different greeting for each of the different statuses. This really only applies if, as I said earlier, your company's not using call groups, i.e. you are receiving calls directly to your phone extension via a direct number. Then you would want to perhaps have something like this where you can record your individual welcome messages, similar to what you would do on your mobile phone if people can't get hold of you. So for each of the different responses, you would record your greeting, and then you would select the greeting that you want to be used for the different statuses. BLF, this area, is where you can configure any extended buttons that you might have on your phone. So blind forwarding, essentially, you can have number one set to be, for instance, dial a particular extension by simply just pressing that button. Again, it can be used to transfer a call even. We tend not to use BLF too much to transfer calls. We prefer to announce the call so that it gives the caller the chance to decide whether they want to accept the call or not. But if you're not using that sort of function or process internally, and it's just a matter of saying, no problem, I'll put you through now. You can then press the number 1 that you've set as a BLF, and it will automatically go straight through to the recipient and dial them, and then the recipient can take the call. Within the BLF area, when it comes to configuring your phone, you also have the ability to have a custom speed dial. So for instance, if you have a particular supplier that you know you call quite regularly, then, let's put the number in there, and now on exiting, if I have extended phone buttons on my phone system, on my desk phone, then number 1 would be assigned to be this phone number, this name, first name, last name. So I could literally just press that number 1 and it would dial that person. So finally, the last thing I'm going to click on and just show you is where you get the desktop app, if that's something that you're interested in and want to use instead of the web app. So if I click on the Windows icon up here in the top left, just under my picture. So this is in case you forget or can't remember where your welcome email is. If you're in the web app, you can click on the Windows icon in the top left, and you'll be given these 2 areas here to help you find your way.